It was a quiet, sunlit morning when the engines thundered into the small town of Cedar Falls, shattering the peace that usually hung over the lonely roadside diner. The rumble grew louder until the windows trembled, and every head turned as a group of bikers pulled into the gravel lot, their black leather jackets reflecting the sharp light. Among them was their leader, Marcus Reaper Stone, a man whose name carried weight far beyond the rumbling of his Harley. His presence commanded silence. He was the kind of man who looked carved from stone, with eyes that spoke of 1,000 miles of roads and regrets. People whispered stories about him. Some feared him, others respected him, but no one truly knew the man behind the scars and tattoos. If you believe that kindness can come from the most unexpected hearts, that everyone deserves a second chance, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Bike Diaries, where real stories of compassion come alive. Inside the diner, the clinking of coffee cups faded as the bikers took their seats. The waitress, her name tag read Emma, moved quietly between tables, her smile polite but weary. She was young, maybe 28, with tired eyes that held the weight of too many sleepless nights. When she leaned forward to pour coffee, Reaper noticed something beneath her attempt at cheer. A faint bruise near her jawline, half covered by foundation. The kind that no makeup could fully hide. But there was more. A mark on her wrist, visible when her sleeve rode up. Finger marks, clear as day. It wasn't the first time he'd seen something like that. It stirred memories of his past, the kind of past that still haunted him when the nights grew too long. Reaper's younger sister, Katie, had worn those same bruises years ago. She'd hidden them the same way, smiled the same forced smile, made the same excuses, until the day she couldn't anymore. Until the day he'd gotten the call that shattered his world. He'd been too late to save her. That guilt had lived in his chest ever since, a weight no amount of road or whiskey could lift. Emma worked in silence, keeping her eyes down. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed a plate before him. Reaper's gaze lingered, not with anger, but with concern. He didn't say a word, but inside something shifted, a quiet fury mixed with an ache he hadn't felt in years. He saw his sister in her fear, in the way she flinched when someone moved too quickly, in the way she apologized for things that weren't her fault. Outside, the sky turned gray, and the wind began to pick up dust from the lot. The other bikers laughed among themselves, but Reaper wasn't listening. He watched as Emma slipped into the back kitchen, her shoulders slumped. He followed her with his eyes, noticing how she flinched when a man, presumably her boyfriend, emerged from the kitchen. The man was thick-set with a mean look and eyes that burned with quiet cruelty. He grabbed Emma's arm hard enough to make her wince, leaning close to whisper something that made her face go pale. Then he kissed her cheek, a possessive gesture that made Reaper's blood run cold. And in that moment, everything became clear. The boyfriend's name was Derek, as Reaper learned from listening to the other waitstaff. He worked as a cook in the back, which meant Emma couldn't escape him. Not even at work. Not even in the one place where she should have felt safe. Reaper watched as Derek bumped past Emma deliberately, making her drop a tray of silverware. She immediately bent to pick it up, apologizing, always apologizing. Derek just laughed, a cruel sound that made the other diners look away uncomfortably. Hours later, when the lunch crowd thinned, Reaper lingered alone at the counter, pretending to sip the last of his coffee. He watched Derek walk past Emma, bumping her shoulder hard enough to make her stumble. She whispered an apology, but the man's response was sharp, venomous. "Stupid bitch," he muttered, just loud enough for Reaper to hear. "Can't do anything right." Emma's face flushed with shame as she hurried away. Reaper's jaw tightened. There was no mistaking it now. This wasn't just stress. It was fear, the kind that traps people in silence, the kind that kills them slowly from the inside out. That night, Reaper couldn't shake the image of her bruises. He sat in his garage, the neon light flickering across rows of bikes, lost in thought. His brothers from the club came by, joking and loud, but he barely heard them. He kept thinking about Katie, about how life had once given him a chance to help someone and how he'd failed. How he'd believed her when she said she was fine. How he'd let her push him away because he didn't want to make things worse. How he'd found out too late that fine meant dying inside. His second-in-command, a man called Diesel, noticed his mood. "You good, brother?" Diesel asked, his voice rough but concerned. "That waitress at the diner today," Reaper said quietly. "The one with the bruises." Diesel's expression darkened. He'd seen them too. They all had. "Yeah, I saw. Her boyfriend works there. Cook in the back, putting his hands on her right in front of everyone." "You want to handle it?" Diesel asked. It wasn't really a question. They all knew what "handle it" meant in their world. But Reaper shook his head. "Not like that. Not this time. We do this right. We do this so she knows she has a choice." He made up his mind that night. Violence would be easy. Violence was what men like Derek understood. But Emma needed more than revenge. She needed a way out. She needed to know that someone saw her, that someone cared, that she deserved better than living in fear. The next morning, when the sun rose, Emma came into work early, her hair tied back neatly, trying once more to hide the new mark on her cheek. A fresh bruise, darker than yesterday's. She was surprised to see the bikers' motorcycles already lined up outside, their chrome catching the morning light. All 12 of them. Reaper sat at the counter, waiting. When she approached, her eyes widened slightly in recognition, but she kept her professional smile in place. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice soft, almost apologetic. "Please," Reaper said. Then, as she poured, he spoke quietly enough that only she could hear. "I know what's happening to you." Emma's hand froze. Coffee spilled over the rim of the cup, pooling on the counter. "I don't know what you mean," she said quickly. Too quickly, her smile trembling. "The bruises," Reaper continued gently. "The way you flinch. The way he treats you. I know because I've seen it before. My sister. She wore the same bruises. Made the same excuses." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She set the coffee pot down with shaking hands. "I'm fine," she whispered, the lie obvious even to her. "It's not what you think." "Where is she now?" Emma asked, her voice barely audible. "Your sister?" Reaper's jaw tightened. "She's dead. He killed her 3 years ago. Beat her so bad one night that she never woke up." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Emma's face crumbled, tears spilling before she could stop them. She knew. In that moment, she knew that's where she was headed if she didn't get out. Derek stormed out from the back, his face red with anger. "What the hell is going on here? Emma, get back to work. And you," he pointed at Reaper. "You got a problem?" Reaper stood slowly. The entire diner fell silent. The bikers behind him straightened, their presence heavy and solid. Derek's aggressive tone faltered as Reaper walked toward him. Not fast, but with a calm that made the man's arrogance crumble. "Yeah," Reaper said quietly. "I got a problem. My problem is men who think putting their hands on women makes them tough. Men who hide their weakness behind someone else's fear." "That's my girlfriend," Derek snarled, trying to reclaim his courage. "None of your business." "She's a human being," Reaper replied, his voice still calm, but edged with steel. "And that makes it everyone's business." Derek tried to step forward, tried to intimidate, but Diesel and the other bikers rose from their seats. 12 men, all of them bigger than Derek, all of them with faces that said they'd seen real violence and weren't impressed by bullies. Derek's face went pale. "You think you're scary?" Reaper continued. "You think hitting someone who can't fight back makes you a man? Let me tell you what a real man does. A real man protects. A real man lifts people up, doesn't tear them down. You? You're nothing but a coward hiding behind closed doors." "This is harassment," Derek shouted, his voice cracking. "I'll call the cops." "Please do," Reaper said. "And while they're here, they can take pictures of all those bruises on Emma, the ones you gave her, the ones that tell a story you don't want told." The diner owner, an older woman who'd been watching from behind the register, finally spoke up. "Derek, you're fired. Get your things and get out of my restaurant, now." "You can't fire me," Derek protested. "I just did," the owner said firmly. "I've seen what you've been doing to Emma. I've heard the way you talk to her. I should have done this months ago, and I'm ashamed I didn't. But it ends now. Get out." Derek looked around the diner, searching for support, but found none. Every customer, every employee was looking at him with disgust. His power, his control, had evaporated in an instant. He grabbed his jacket and stormed toward the door, but Reaper stepped in front of him one last time. "If you go near her again," Reaper said softly, so only Derek could hear, "if you so much as send her a text message, you're going to find out what it's like to be on the receiving end. And brother, I promise you won't like it. We know where you live, we know where you work, we know everything. Touch her again, and you'll answer to all of us." Derek's face went white. He shoved past Reaper and practically ran to his truck, tires screeching as he fled the parking lot. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Emma turned, her face streaked with tears, and whispered a thank you so faint it barely left her lips. Reaper shook his head gently. "You don't need to thank anyone. You just need to start again, without fear, without him." The diner erupted in quiet murmurs. People who had watched in silence earlier now looked ashamed of their inaction. One old man even stood to clap softly, and slowly others joined until the sound filled the small space like a heartbeat. Emma covered her face with her hands and sobbed, but this time they were tears of relief, of release, of finally being seen. The diner owner, whose name was Margaret, approached Emma and wrapped her arms around the young woman. "You're safe now, honey," Margaret whispered. "And if he comes back, if he even tries, you call me. You call the police. You call these boys. You're not alone anymore." Diesel pulled out his phone and handed Emma a business card. "That's a women's shelter 3 towns over. They're good people. They'll help you get a restraining order, find a safe place to stay, whatever you need. You call that number, you tell them Reaper sent you, and they'll take care of you." Emma took the card with trembling hands. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll be safe," Reaper replied. "That's all any of us want to hear." The story of what happened spread through Cedar Falls by nightfall. The men who had once been feared became a symbol of unexpected kindness. People began to see the bikers differently, less as outlaws and more as protectors. The local newspaper ran a story. Hell's Angels rescue local waitress from abusive boyfriend. It went viral on social media, shared thousands of times, with people commenting about how wrong they'd been about bikers, about judgment, about who the real heroes were. Emma left her apartment that night, taking only what she could carry, and went to the shelter. The women there welcomed her with open arms, gave her a safe bed, and started her on the path to healing. She filed a restraining order against Derek the next day, and when he violated it by showing up at the shelter, the police arrested him. He was charged with multiple counts of domestic violence, assault, and stalking. He'd be going away for a long time. Margaret kept Emma's job open for her, but Emma decided she needed a fresh start. She moved to a different town, found work at a small cafe where the owner treated her with respect. Sometimes Reaper would stop by for coffee, not as a savior, but as a friend checking in. Each time she smiled, and now it reached her eyes. The fear had left her face, replaced by something softer. Hope. But the most surprising part wasn't what Reaper did that day. It was how it changed him. For years, he'd lived behind walls built from guilt and loss. Helping Emma broke something open. It reminded him that even the toughest hearts could still heal others. It reminded him that Katie's death didn't have to be meaningless, that he could honor her memory by saving others like her. His club brothers noticed the change too. They began organizing charity rides for women's shelters, food drives for struggling families, and community work that softened an entire town's perception of them. What started as a single act of courage turned into a movement. The Hells Angels chapter in Cedar Falls became known not for their roughness, but for their compassion. They escorted women to court dates when they had to face their abusers. They fixed up safe houses. They raised money for domestic violence prevention programs. One evening, months later, as the sun set over Cedar Falls, Emma stood outside the cafe where she now worked and saw a familiar line of motorcycles pass by. The leader raised a hand as he rode past, a quiet acknowledgement, a bond formed not by words but by shared humanity. She smiled, her heart full, knowing that sometimes kindness doesn't come wrapped in gentle hands. It comes roaring in on two wheels, wearing leather, and carrying a heart that has known pain. Reaper carried a photo of Katie in his wallet, right next to one that Emma had given him. Her new driver's license photo taken after she'd moved away and started over. She was smiling, really smiling, and she'd written on the back, "To Reaper, you saved my life. You gave me my future. Thank you for seeing me when I'd become invisible. Your friend always, Emma." He looked at both photos sometimes, when the road got long and the memories got heavy. Katie, who he couldn't save. Emma, who he could. And he understood that we can't change the past, can't undo the failures that haunt us. But we can choose every single day to be better, to see the people others ignore, to stand up when it's easier to look away, to be the voice for those who've been silenced by fear. If this story touched your heart, or reminded you, that real strength lies in compassion. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Bike Diaries, where we celebrate the goodness that still exists in this world. Before you go, comment below. Do you believe even the toughest people can have the softest hearts? Have you ever witnessed an act of courage that changed someone's life? Your story might inspire someone else who needs to hear it. And as the last light faded behind the mountains, Cedar Falls remembered that day, not for the roar of engines, but for the silence that followed. When kindness finally spoke louder than fear. When a man who'd lost everything found redemption in saving another. When 12 bikers in leather proved that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear cuts, ride Harleys, and carry scars that taught them how to recognize pain in others. Emma went on to become an advocate for domestic violence survivors. She spoke at schools, at community centers, at anywhere people would listen. She told her story, and she told Reaper's story, and she reminded people that salvation can come from the most unexpected places, that the scariest-looking people might have the gentlest souls, that we should never judge someone by their appearance, their reputation, or their past. Derek served 3 years in prison. When he got out, he violated his restraining order again, trying to find Emma. But this time, he found Reaper instead. The conversation they had was brief and one-sided. Derek left town that night and never came back. Some say he moved across the country. Others say he learned his lesson. Either way, Emma never saw him again. Reaper's Club continued their community work, and over time, the Hells Angels chapter in Cedar Falls became an integral part of the town. They were invited to schools to talk about making better choices. They were asked to speak at churches about redemption. They were welcomed at community events where once they'd been feared. All because one man looked at a bruised waitress and decided that this time he wouldn't be too late. This time, he'd speak up. This time, he'd make a difference. And in doing so, he honored his sister's memory in the most meaningful way possible. By making sure her death meant something. By making sure other women didn't suffer the same fate. By turning his pain into purpose and his guilt into action. The diner in Cedar Falls still stands, and Emma's story is told there by Margaret to anyone who will listen. A reminder that we all have the power to change someone's life, that it doesn't take much. Just awareness, just courage, just the willingness to see what others ignore and do something about it. Reaper still rides that same stretch of highway, his brothers beside him, the wind in his face and the weight in his chest a little lighter than it used to be. Because he knows now that while he couldn't save Katie, he saved Emma. And through Emma, he saved dozens of others who heard her story and found the courage to leave, to speak up, to choose themselves over fear. Sometimes, late at night when the clubhouse is quiet and his brothers have gone home, Reaper sits alone with his thoughts. He thinks about that morning in the diner, about the choice he made to speak up instead of look away. And he knows, deep in his bones, that Katie would be proud, that she's watching from wherever souls go when they leave this world, and she's smiling, because her baby brother finally learned the lesson she died teaching him. That silence protects abusers, that looking away enables evil, that the only thing necessary for bad things to happen is for good people to do nothing, and that sometimes the people who look the scariest are the ones brave enough to stand between the vulnerable and those who would harm them. This is the story of how a Hell's Angel biker noticed a waitress's bruises and changed everything. Not just for her, but for an entire community. Not just for that moment, but for years to come. Not just through violence or intimidation, but through compassion, awareness, and the simple act of giving a damn when others looked away. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being the kind of person who believes that everyone deserves to be seen, to be safe, to be valued. Share this story. Let it remind someone that help exists, that escape is possible, that they don't have to live in fear, and that sometimes salvation rides a Harley and wears leather and sees you when you've become invisible to everyone else.